sure your face is still in the picture.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. I just won't look at it. Hate looking at myself. Yes.
Go for it.
I was going to say good morning, but it's not quite good morning anymore. It's good afternoon now. So thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak to you today. Just a short speech, because I think you've probably been listening for a little while, and maybe you've been in the service as well. And surely everyone wants to get home for their Sunday roast or something along those lines. So I'm Joanne Somner. I work for Daisy's Dream. And I'm their community fundraiser. So I spend a lot of my time out talking to groups like yourselves, talking about what the charity does, talking about fundraising opportunities, and also in this instance coming along to say thank you for what you've done for us already, because you've raised some money for us. So I thought what I would do is I'd just give you a few statistics, which are quite sobering thoughts, and then go on to talk about what Daisy's Dream do in terms of helping children where there's been a loss of a parent or a sibling. So every day in the UK, 111 children will experience the loss of a parent or a sibling. That's 1 in 29 children will have experienced the death of someone they love by the time they reach 16. So if you think about an average class size in school, one of those children will have experienced that terrible loss, which of course can be absolutely devastating for them. It can cause loss of appetite, anger, fear, confusion, and it can set some children on the wrong path. They might enter into risky behaviours. They might start to go down a path that they wouldn't have done if they had that guidance and support from the full family, and that person that they'd lost hadn't died. So that really is something that's quite difficult to think about. And Daisy's Dream is there, and actually our logo is we're catching a petal that's fallen, and I really like that on our logo. That was thought about really well by whoever designed it. Daisy's Dream was formed in 1996 by a lady called Penny, and Penny unfortunately experienced the sudden loss of her husband, and she had a young son who was around 5 or 6, and she was expecting their second child. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that she realised that her son's behaviours were starting to change, and she was really quite concerned by what was happening, and she was looking for support in Berkshire to help him. Of course, there are marvellous charities like Cruise who support adults with their grief, but there wasn't something specifically for children. She was able to access a service actually in Gloucestershire, and it was a great benefit to her son. And she thought, well, why is it that Berkshire doesn't have this service? It just doesn't seem right. So around her kitchen table, and I know it's around her kitchen table because one of her friends who set up the charity with her still volunteers with us. So she's been with us since 1996. And she said, we literally sat round the table one night and said, why don't we set up a charity? Let's do something about this. How can we fundraise? What can we do? How can we support children? And the first sort of thought was, well, what do we call the charity? So do we call it after my son or my daughter? Do we call it after me? Is it No, let's call it Daisy's Dream after the dog. So apparently Penny's dog was called Daisy. And in fact, I believe our early literature included a picture of Daisy, which was quite confusing for people when they thought they were donating to a dog's charity, and hence why we now have the lovely Daisy that we do. We're just about to change the branding actually with a more traditional Daisy, I think you could say, bringing us up to date with the times, and actually from listening to the conversation about attracting youth, actually we've got to freshen everything up as well to make sure that we move with the times and that people want to support us and work with us. So what do? Well, we do a lot of our work in schools actually. We have 5 professionally trained therapeutic practitioners, which is a bit of a mouthful, But those lovely ladies go into schools and they talk to children where they're struggling with the loss of a parent. And also we talk to the teachers. So we do a lot of group work where we go into schools. And in fact, our chief executive has done one very recently and been into a school where there are 7 children in that school that have lost a parent, which is quite unusual. And they just wanted to know how they support those children. How do they talk about death? It can be one of those things that as adults we struggle with talking about death, the language that we use. But with children, it's even more important to be very clear, because any confusion for a child can really upset them and in some cases perhaps make things worse than they already are. Our therapists also do group sessions. So we bring groups together, quite often age groups, because talking about teenagers, I think we all know I've had teenagers, and unfortunately sometimes they don't want to talk and they feel quite nervous of talking to an adult. But actually bringing a group of teenagers together can be very useful. They understand from talking to other teenagers that they're not the only one feeling that the way that they are, and that they're not so isolated, and they can actually form sort of peer group friendships and have that support that they need. I've been lucky enough to go along to one of our group sessions and for some of the smaller children. Wow, that's exhausting. I don't know how our therapists do it, but we bring them together to talk about loss, but also to help them feel that they're not on their own, for them to be able to feel positive about life, because this shouldn't be something that defines their life moving forward. Of course it's devastating, of course it's terrible, but they have a life to lead and we need to help them move forward in a positive way so that they can live that fulfilling life. And actually, the money that you have raised for us, so I think it was it your autumn tea party? Long time ago now, although probably the weather was very similar, because it's just like everlasting winter at the moment, isn't it? But you raised over £600, which is fabulous. And what that will do for, in terms of the support that it will give, is you will support 2 children and their families through one of the most devastating times that they could experience. So that will provide people being on the other end of the phone for those parents if they need to talk to somebody. The children will be welcomed into groups, and typically around 6 one-to-one sessions helps a child to work through the situation that they find themselves in and those circumstances, and actually help them to move forward in that positive way. So that's what you lovely people have done. So I'm here to say thank you, and I will send an official thank you, because I don't think I have, so I apologise for that. I will send an official thank you in a written form so that you can share that with the rest of the congregation if you'd like to. But thank you for listening. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask, and I will answer if I can.
You said that, especially for young children, it's important not to, they shouldn't be confused, because that makes things worse. What sort of thing might, I'm thinking about the fact that, in Christianity we talk about life after death. Is that
we haven't gone that far as far as I know, but I think I do understand what you mean. In particular, we also support families where there has been a terminal illness diagnosis. So actually the language that we use with children so that they understand what is going to happen is very important. And being very black and white, actually. So when I talk with one of our therapists, I'm not trained to talk to children in the way that they do. I'm a fundraiser. But talking to our therapists, I learn a lot. And some of the language that we use as adults, for example, we quite often say that somebody has passed away or passed on. And that can be quite difficult for a child to understand when in everyday language you could pass somebody in the street. So we're using the same words. The therapists try to talk very openly and softly and gently as they can, but to be very clear. So not being afraid of saying the word death, because some people think that is not a good word to say. And talking about treatments, so in particular for So, for example, a lot of the children where they're preparing for loss, they're asking, why is mummy losing her hair? Or why is daddy always feeling sick? Or why does daddy spend a lot of time at the hospital? So we help them with those conversations as well in as simple language as we can. It needs to be age appropriate, but it needs to be very clear. And quite often, the children will hear that, a child will hear that and then say, oh, okay, can I go out and play with my bike now? Because they just process things in a very different way to us adults. So we have to respect that. And I have a huge amount of respect for our therapists because you just never know what a child is going to say.
Thinking of the tragic death of the headmistress of County Primary down the road, is that too remote for you to try and calm the situation with the children? Without
giving away any confidences, I believe we have been consulted in that school. It was obviously a devastating thing to read, to hear, to watch the news reports. But yes, absolutely, that is somewhere that... So we cover all of Berkshire, and we have had people reach out to us and we have supported some people. And we've had other schools actually in... for example, in Burfield, not far from where I live, we've had 3 families, very tragically, where 3 mums have been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And actually that community has come together beautifully to support those families. And we were asked to go into 2 of the primary schools because the children that were involved were in infant and in primary. To talk to them, the parents and the children, about what is coming, what has happened, again using the language that is very clear and simple, and to support the teachers, the teaching staff in particular, because again they don't know what a child is going to ask them on a day-to-day basis. So yes, we do. I'm very impressed with how wide we managed to reach our services with just 5 therapists, and 3 of them are part-time, so it's not even full-time 5 staff, but somehow they managed to reach the people that really need them. Hopefully, I didn't even check that. I hate looking at myself on those things, but I stayed still. Otherwise, I'm normally up and down, and I've normally got a microphone in my hand. And
well, thank you very much. Shall we...